Kathleen will be giving a speech, speaking on leadership as the second pathway in her Innovative Planning Pathways track. In this track, she learned about leadership styles and attributes and the difference between a leader and a manager. Today, she speaks about leadership attributes in her speech entitled, What I Have in Common with Richard Nixon.
How did I end up in Yorba Linda, California at the Nixon Museum comparing my leadership skills to a former president? I'm not a historian. I don't really have much interest in Richard Nixon, to tell you the truth. I blame it all on the Oregon Ducks football team. My husband graduated from the University of Oregon, and he's a big Ducks fan. And this year, they went to the Rose Bowl. And he said to me, why don't we go to the Rose Bowl? That sounds like fun to me. Off we went to sunny California, enjoyed a Rose Bowl game. If you're not football fans, the Ducks won by 1 point in a heart-thumping game. They were victorious, however, which made the whole week. We had a little bit of time to do something else and enjoy Southern California. We wanted to enjoy it, but I also had this speech to write. And those seemed very disconnected goals. Fortunately, I had my friend Siri with me. And we had a chat. And she said, check out the Nixon Library, which was only 30 minutes away. We jumped in the car and off we went to the Nixon Library. All of you probably know what Richard Nixon is most famous for. He's most famous for Watergate. And there's a lot of Watergate at the museum. But I was very intrigued to learn that Richard Nixon himself is really a self-made man. He came from very relatively low income, hard-working family, lived in a very small home, a very modest house, and worked his way up, very well educated. He had a scholarship, a full ride to Harvard, that he gave up because his family couldn't afford to transport him there. He later went to Duke and got his law degree. Obviously very well educated, and early on decided that politics was his thing, and that's what he was going to do for his career. I was also really impressed with how much he'd accomplished. He barely, just by the slimmest of margins, was able to be elected. For the first time in 120 years after he was elected, he had to face both houses of Congress were in the opposite party. He barely wins, and then has to work with the opposite political party. A tough job. You have to have a lot of good leadership skills to do that. And he must have had good leadership skills because he did amazing number of things. He passed Title IX, giving women or girls more access to sports. He began the war on cancer with $100 million in funding for the war on cancer. He helped desegregation continue. He opened the trade door to China, which was an amazing thing. And that isn't even the end of it. You might not like this, but the Environmental Protection started under his, the Clean Air Act was signed by him. He also started the space shuttle program. And just to top it off, as the icing on the cake, he ended the Vietnam War and moved all of our troops to a volunteer army. So I thought, wow, there's a lot more to this person than Watergate. And one of the things that I looked at next was he a leader or was he a manager? And the reason that was interesting is because of his introversion and his very detail-oriented nature. He had these long legal notepads where he kept all of his notes. He just didn't just record things. He kept notes on all of his conversations, all of his thoughts when he thought through issues. He wrote them on yellow legal pads, and they had examples of them there. So he struck me really as more of a manager intuitively, that he was inherently a manager. He was very running the day-to-day activities of the political party in the White House. But he had to have some visionary skills. He had to. You know, the idea of opening up China, all the things that he did. He either had visionary skills or he had people that he surrounded himself with that had visionary skills. I lend towards management. That's my background. I tend to be a list maker and a doer. I need to work on the visionary side of things. The other part of the leadership skills that Postmaster emphasized had to do with leadership attributes. They had things such as leading by example as being a leadership attribute, open-mindedness is a leadership attribute, optimism. Anyway, several other things that they had as leadership attributes. What I discovered was that, oh, I know the final one. The final one was integrity. So when you go back and you think about the Toastmasters' attributes, the one that seemed to be missing the most in Richard Nixon was integrity. In the end, that's what undermined him. He would argue, and he does, through some tapes, there are lots of tapes that listen to in the Nixon Museum, that he was just doing what was common for his time. That other people did the same thing to him when he was running for office, and it was the practice of the day, the dirty tricks and the other things to undermine your competitors in an election. Nevertheless, the Congress and the people and his own party decided that it was wrong, and he resigned from office. So what do Richard Nixon and I have in common? Nothing. Thank you, Mr. President.